Do you want to improve your coding? How about creating a battleship game? You can even play against your computer. Previously, we created a battleship game and we've created quite a bit of code already. In the last video, we coded so the computer could shoot. In this video, we're going to do tactical shooting. Now, on your battleship board, when you hit a boat, then you know afterwards one of the 4 squares either side or above or below is also going to hit. So we know after one hit we can tactically shoot by limiting our shooting to one of the 4 options. If we miss, then that reduces to 3 and so on. Now if we hit, that means that we know the direction. Is it going to be horizontal or vertical? So we can tactically shoot once we know we've hit, and we don't need to look at the other direction. So once we've shot and we know it's a hit, we've already got a hit, so we've got 2 hits together, we can look at the +1 and the -2 positions. Now if we were to hit 3 times, then we know we can look in the +1 and -3 positions. Remembering also we can do this vertically as well as horizontally. Okay, so let's have a look at tactical shooting. The computer can take random shots, but it's not going to beat a player because it plays no tactics. So we're going to start off by telling the computer when there's been a hit or when a battleship has been sunk. So in the check shot we had missed equals 1. So we could change that to 0. So if it's a miss, if it's 0, then that will be appended to miss. But instead of changing the missed in the loop, we're going to, before the if statement, we're going to put it in when it hits the boat. So we can say missed equals 1 when it hits, and when it sinks the ship it can be 2. And that way, if we pass that back, when we return it, when the function's called, then we can know if the shot missed a boat completely, if it's hit or it sunk the ship. Now that's important because in our tactic we need to know when the boat's been hit. So if we look in our for loop, in our check shot, we're going to have missed, and after that we're going to see if miss equals 1, we're going to do something. If it's 2, let's line that up. We're going to do something. And if it's 0, maybe. So what we're going to do, well, if we're going to tell the computer where it might want to shoot, we really need to create a list. Let's call it tactics. So this list, we can contain the candidate places on the board where we're going to tell the computer to shoot. Now if it's hit, we need to give the computer information. If it's sunk the ship, that information is go back to being a random guess. So we can say tactics is an empty set if missed equals 2. Now what happens when the boat's been hit? So we know the next guess should be 1 above, below, left or right if it hasn't been used before and it's still on the board. So we're going to calculate what the tactics are in a function. which we will do in a minute, and then we're going to pass those suggestions, candidates for shooting, to the get comp shot. Now let's assume they're in order of which we want to use. So when we get the shot from the computer, we only need to add tactics, the first place, which is tactics 0, as the shot. So if tactics, if it's empty, we want to ignore it. So we can say if length of tactics is greater than 0, then we want the shot to equal tactics 0. Now if it's not, we'll just use a random amount. So it's not going to be in guesses, so the get shot comp only needs this slight amendment, this slight change. So now we've got the missed, so we know if it's hit, we know if it's sunk the ship. We're going to use this tactics, so we want the first element in this list to be the place on the board where we want the computer to try to shoot, and we know if it hits, so if missed equals 1, the variable missed equals 1, then we know we want to try to shoot 1 above, below, either side. So in our function we can say tactics equals, and then we want to calculate the tactics, and we're going to give it the tactics. So if we give it the shot, past the shot, we don't need to put it into that list. So let's create our function called calculate tactics. So define calculate tactics with the shot and tactics. Now if the tactics, if the length of tactics, if it's empty list, then we know if it's the first hit, we only just need to look 1 above, below, either side. Now if it's more than the first hit, then we need to do something else. So if the tactics list is empty, then we know it's the first hit. We just need to create a list where it has the numbers either side of the shot. So we're going to create a temporary list. So we have shot -1, shot +1, shot -10, and shot +10. So that's created the places above, below, and either side of our hit. So we need to check to see if these values are on the board and not in guesses. So we'll need to pass guesses. So let's do that. Calc tactics. I'm going to have guesses. And in our loop for we don't know the length of temp. This temporary list is the potential candidates where we want the computer to shoot, so that could be a different length. So for I in range of length of tap, if temp I not in guesses and I is less than 100, actually it should be temp I, shouldn't it? So if the value is less than 100 and the value is greater than -1, so it's on the board, then we can append the candidate into a new list. So let's define, so CAND stands for candidate. So we're saying out of this temporary list, if these values are on the board and not in guesses, then they can go in this candidate list. Now, what order are we going to put them in? Well, it could be any order. At the moment, we've got them in the order that we've created here: -1, +1, -10, and +10. But we could shuffle them, for example. So if we import, we go to the top and import random. So we want to shuffle the candidate values. So now we pass back that list of candidate values after a hit, and then when we get the shot from the computer, if there's a value in that list, then it will use the first value as a shot. If that list is empty, then it will use a random value. We've accidentally used square brackets. That obviously should have been round brackets there. Always have to debug your code. Okay, so temp we've not defined. So obviously in here we're going to put something if tactics is longer. So if we've hit a boat more than once. Let's see if we run that, what errors there are. So it does come out with the board, so that's a good sign. Now what happens if we've guessed one either side of a hit and it's missed? Well, we've already got our list created, so if our missed is not 1 or 2, so we've got a 0, meaning we've took a shot and it's missed the bolt, then the tactics, if the length of the tactics is if it's not empty, then all we need to do is get rid of the first the location, the number in the first place in the list tactics, and then the guess will go to the place in the second index of the list. So the list tactics has got the candidate places, and if the first one is wrong, it moves on to the second one. So we can do tactics dot pop and then 0. So that's our tactics if we've hit, then missed, and if we've completed the bolt. So now what we need to do is work out what happens when we've got a hit and then we've hit again. So we need to pass hit, the list of hits, to our calc tactics. Now in here we've got if length of tactics is greater than, or if less than 1. So if it's more than 1, then we need to check to see if each shot, each candidate place is in hit. So if our shot -1 is in a hit, or if our shot +1 is in a hit, then remember we're looking at 2 hits together and the candidate should be either side of them. So if we're a horizontal, we've had 2 horizontal hits, then the next shot should be either side of them. If they're vertical, the next shot should be one above or one below. So we can say if shot -1 is in hit, remember we passed that to count tactics. So if that's in hit, then our temp is going to equal, instead of equaling the 4 values, we're not going to have the up and down values. It's going to be not just -1, but it's going to be -2 and +1. So we've got 2 hits and our candidates are either side. Now we do that with all 4 positions. So if shot is +1 in hit, then it's going to be +2 and -1. So those are our horizontals. And now we do the same, except for instead of going across, we're going to go up and down. So it's going to be -10 and +10, and -20 and +10, and +20 and -10. So now we've got what happens if we've got 1 hit, we've got what happens if we've got 2 hits, what happens if we've got a hit and a miss, and what happens if we sunk the boat. So now we've got an idea of our tactics. So let's have a look at our board, perhaps at the end. And also maybe have a look at our board of boats that were created by the computer. So let's put that first. So we're going to see after it's run, and once we've finished our for loop of 50 shots, we can see the board how it's finished and the original board of the boats. So let's save that. Now let's run that. Okay, so we can see our original board here. It's not completed, but you can see, for example, the boat of length 5, it's managed to hit all 5. So it's definitely an improvement by using these tactics, but it's not finished. So our tactics has dealt with 2 hits, but it hasn't dealt with 3 hits or 4 hits. So we know if we had, for example, 3 hits together, that the shot -1 and the shot, if they're both in hits, then the third hit would be shot -2. So although it's quite a bit of coding, we need to do this. We need to look to see if we've got more than the 2 hits together. So if shot -2 is in hit, then it's going to be slightly different from if there's just 1. So we've got temp equals shot -2 and shot +1 if there's 2 hits together, but if there's 3, it's going to be shot -3. So we need to do that with all 4 positions. So let's copy and paste the code and change it to the correct direction. So what I'm doing here, I'm copying and pasting in each section, but you can see I'm leaving the previous code in there to make sure that I'm doing it correctly. It's very easy to make a mistake here, and it's not so easy to debug, so let's hope it's going to work. So the last one we're going to put in, so we've got shot plus 20 and minus 10, so minus 10 and plus 30. Right, now let's hope that works. Let's increase the amount of shots to, let's say, 80, so there's a possibility we might even finish the game even. So let's check that, let's run that to see if there's any problems. Okay, now we have the board and we have nearly finished all of them. Very close. Let's try again. So on this game, it's actually completed all of the board. So we need to run it a few times. Perhaps we can add the code to see if the ships is empty. So inside our loop, we need to run a function to see if the ships are empty. So I've copied, and I'm going to paste in some code from the internet that checks if a list of lists is empty. So I didn't even write this code, I've just copied it from the internet. So this code will return true if it's empty. So if it's true, we can just give a message saying the end of game. And maybe a good idea to see how many moves that's in, and then we want to break out of the loop. So that means that if the game's finished, we'll get a message saying how many iterations of the loop has gone. So we need to test that a few times to see if our code is correct. So let's have a look. Here it's not finished. You can see a couple of boats not been hit, but you can see our tactics has drastically improved the computer's form. Now this one, for example, end of game in 65 moves, so therefore the computer's been able to find all the ships quickly. So it's managed to find, when it's found a hit, to get 2 hits, then 3 hits, for example. One more time. There, it hasn't finished. Let's see. Now end of game 64 moves. So it looks like it's working using the tactics. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe.